Hola, ¿qué tal? Aquí Julio Monroy desde Delta Records en Bogotá, Colombia. Hoy tenemos un invitado muy especial. Este live va a estar en inglés, pero tendremos subtítulos en español. We are here with a person who is very important in the audio music industry. He has worked as a mastering engineer, educator, and well, here we are with Jonathan Wyner. Hey, Jonathan, how are you?
Hello, Julio. I'm doing well. How are you?
Very, very good. Thank you for taking the time to do this live stream. It's amazing to have you here. Thank you. And we are with David Sicard in the controls. Hey, David, how are you?
Hello everyone, how are you? Welcome to this new episode of Producing with Julio Monroy. Jonathan, it's a huge honor to have you here. I know it's gonna be a fantastic episode and, well, can't wait to talk a lot about AI. So, for the people watching, remember that you can actually send your questions through the platform on which you are watching, and I will communicate them to Julio and Jonathan. I leave you with the conversation.
Thank you, David. Well, Jonathan, we in this live stream we have only two mandatory questions, and the first is, can you tell us how did you begin in this audio music industry?
Well, I mean, it was a long and winding road,
Like a
which,
song.
yeah, exactly. As is, and in fact, I mean, there was a little bit before the Beatles, but I'm old enough so that the beginning of the journey for me kind of coincides with the beginning of the Beatles. But yeah, as is true for many people, um, I was passionate about music. I came from a musical family, and in fact, it was kind of the family business. And it was, in my mind, there was no other option than to be involved in music. Uh,
Really? So your family they have a business in music?
well, my uncle is a composer. At 96, he's still composing. My grandfather was a composer and a conductor in New York City. My father was a piano teacher.
Wow.
My mother was a visual artist. And so, it's like all over in the environment, in the atmosphere. And really, music was my first language before I spoke English. So, but growing up, the era that I did and that we are, you can't avoid the sort of the way that technology plays a role in bringing music to people and in the creation of music and making it possible to create musical ideas. So I was exposed to the intersection of music and technology again very early.
Hmm.
I did not, at the time, I did not understand that music production was actually a thing, that it was something that you could do for as a job. Everybody, when I was young, was either, if they were involved in technology and music, they were doing live touring, like front of house, or
Yeah.
they were in broadcast. So we just kind of made up our own thing. I got a hold of a tape machine and a guitar amplifier and a microphone and cranked up the reverb and the tremolo and let's explore and find out what we can do. So, there are many steps along the way between becoming a recording engineer and a mixing engineer and a
Hmm.
producer and then a mastering engineer and then being involved in education and working for industry as well. And each was sort of an incremental, it was an expression really of my curiosity and my interest in what was new in the world. And there were great opportunities that came to me. But that was really the beginning of it for me, was like growing up with, like listening to the Jackson 5 and the Temptations on the radio. It was like, oh my God, okay, there's something here
That you like
that
it.
needs to, it's got to be explored. Just, you can't keep me away.
Well, and um, when did you where did you study? Did you study music or audio engineering or?
Yeah, I studied, well, I have a degree from Vassar College, which is a small college here it's in New York State, just north of New York City. My degree is in French horn performance and music composition.
Wow.
But I was not just playing like, Western classical music. I was taking the sound of my horn and feeding it through the modular synthesizer that we had in 1976 in the studio and contorting it. And then I would take it to the radio station, and we would take the tapes that I made in the electronic music studio and broadcast it to the unsuspecting public. We annoyed so many people at 2 in the morning in the north of New York City over the radio. So those were my formal musical studies. And then my audio engineering, I actually went to a short workshop program in Ohio called the Recording Workshop. It's in a town south of Columbus, Ohio, in the middle of nowhere. The beautiful thing about it was there were some state-of-the-art studios that were developed by a guy named Joe Waters, who was a Nashville engineer. And they were fantastic studios, and there was nothing else in the town. Like, there was nothing else to do. So, 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. There's another song reference, right? Sorry. I was I was in the studio. Just, you couldn't, and that's where I really shedded the beginning of learning the applications part of the recording workflow. So I went to the program and stayed up day and night. And I guess I was so annoying, they offered me a job when I graduated the program. They were like, obviously we can't get rid of you, so why don't you stay and teach, record bands. And so that was really the extent of my formal studies, at least at the beginning, around audio engineering. There wasn't much more than that. There were no 4-year programs. There were no educational programs like what we have now.
Well, so you like the Beatles?
Yeah.
You like
Yes. Yeah, I was my really, if I could have chosen any career, it would have been to become John Lennon. But that job was already taken. So I had to figure something else out. I was a huge Beatles fan.
Yeah,
Huge.
they are amazing. Yeah, 8 days a week, long and winding road. Well,
That's right. Well, it's some of their mid and later albums that were truly groundbreaking, but their songwriting was
yeah,
spectacular.
Hey, Jonathan, well, you have worked with a lot of bands
Yes.
as a mastering engineer, right?
Yes.
Like Nirvana.
Like Nirvana. That's right. Yeah.
My favorite band is Nirvana. It's amazing.
I'm sorry it ended prematurely. I really am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you end working with artists like Nirvana or Floyd on?
Yeah, so I mean, each story is a little bit different. But when I started mastering and learning about mastering, it was the mid 1980s. And that was just, 9 months after the commercial introduction of the compact disc when I started. And most mastering studios were heavily invested in analog formats and vinyl. And digital, everybody was suspicious of digital. They didn't know whether it was going to succeed, where it was going to go. And I happened to be working in a studio where the fellow who founded it, his name was Toby Mountain. I think he sort of was a bit of a visionary in this sense. And he just said, this is the future. This is where we're going. And he invested wholly in workflows built around compact disc mastering. So, and early on, like recording something digitally and playing it back without an error was not an easy thing to do. We had to get out a stone tablet and chisel all the zeros and ones. No, anyway, so the along with that, there was a little bit of a story to tell about this is the forward-thinking technology, this is a forward-thinking studio, and there were many record labels and artists that were attracted to that. So many of the artists early on that I worked with were artists who saw an opportunity or saw an advantage or were intrigued, and it kind of aligned with who they were in their sort of musical persona. So, Frank Zappa was a huge fan of digital because it gave him a ton of control. And we worked on a maybe 12 or 15 Frank Zappa records. David Bowie, was known as being somebody who absolutely was ahead of the curve when it came to technology. He actually was the first one to sell shares in himself. And so he had ended his record deal with RCA and said, this is the way of the future. So I ended up working on a whole bunch of David Bowie records because they were attracted to both the record label that we did a lot of work for, which was called Rykodisc at the time, and attracted to the studio. And so the Sub Pop was a young label that started in the late 1980s. And they were also sort of committed to the new format, and they would send us records to work on. And one of the records I got to work on was Bleach by Nirvana.
Oh, my friend.
Yeah. And so the Screaming Trees records, the Mark Lanigan, I don't know if you're familiar with him, another artist from the time. But that was, it was a very exciting time. And it was a time when there was a lot of optimism in music production, and especially in mastering, because now that we had digital, we had to take all of the analog output and migrate that to digital. And so, and that happened, it's probably still happening today, but, over the course of 10 or 15 years, there was a lot of remastering and repurposing. And then there were all the artists that were doing the new stuff. And the other thing that was exciting, and this is something I find really interesting, is that I think in response to the digital medium, there were certain genres or subgenres that were born. And what I mean by that, anybody who's watching this, who's had experience with analog and digital, understands that the sound comes back from those media very differently, especially in the low end. Like with analog media, you get this nonlinearity in the bass, and the very low end gets kind of rolled off. And so a lot of modern pop records that are made today could never have been made on analog tape, because the analog tape would not support the low frequency extension. And there's a distortion characteristic also to tape that would be problematic if you want the low end to hit home, it does on a Beyonce record.
Yeah.
So in the late 1980s, when people were starting to figure out digital, we started to get records that sounded different than anything sounded before. And it was in response to the fact that this platform now existed, digital medium. So it was very, very, very exciting. It was, you ask about the Pink Floyd project. That was actually a re-release of Live at the Oakland Coliseum. And that concert was performed, it was back when they were touring with basically a quad playback system that they would play to 60,000 people in stadiums. And so taking that and sort of folding it down for a stereo presentation was a trick. It's quite wild.
I was wondering, you have been in different pitches of audio, so analog, digital, and now that we have the AI that in the not now but a few years ago, but now all the people or a lot of people are creating music or mastering music. And what do you think about this?
About AI in music? Yeah. So, I'm actually really glad that we have an opportunity to talk about this, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding or a lack of understanding about what we mean when we say AI. AI really represents many different technologies or applications of technologies. There's machine learning and deep learning, and there are different strategies for curating the data sets that make up the AI. There's generative AI, and then there's, very broadly speaking, there's AI that's used to evaluate some audio, and then after the evaluation process, the execution, the engineering is done with traditional DSP. So like all of the AI mastering platforms, they don't actually use AI to do the work, they use AI to do the measurement, right? That's where the automation is. It's like, okay, this track, could use a little more high end or a little less high end or a little squeeze or whatever, but somebody's curating some sort of shapes that are represented by the data set in the machine learning platform. But then all of the work is done with traditional EQ and compression and like DSP. So none of that is being done in AI. Generative AI is wholly made up from diffusion models and from neural networks. So that's audio that is generated by AI and sort of made up out of nothing. There was no audio to begin with. The third and sort of in between state are things like stem separation or AI informed tools like noise reduction tools, like dialogue isolation, that kind of thing. And so here again, it's a neural network that is splitting the signal. But again, the work is not being done by AI per se, it's being done in an FFT environment. So when you say AI, first of all, you may mean one of many different things. So that's just sort of setting some definitions and maybe
well,
that's amazing.
So yeah, go ahead.
I do have a question. For example, I've seen that machine learning actually what does is that it has a lot of information built into, for example, an AI application. I can be completely wrong. That's what I'm asking. And it actually sends an output that it's based on probability. For example, the way that chat AI works with specific tokens, and it makes like a probabilistic analysis and put out the most probable tokens. How does this work, for example, on generative AI, especially in music? Because it blows my mind. Like how does this, how the pixels are created and be coherent with each other?
So I'm actually not going to be give you the best definition of what the latest diffusion models are doing. Okay. But they use a very similar idea, which is they gradually add noise to a musical program and start to see the clumping of the information in the noise, and then they base there is a probabilistic aspect to the output, but it's a different methodology than LLMs use for creating text. But that's about as much as I can say, and already I think I don't sound so smart. So
that's great.
But yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Talking about Nirvana, I actually have here a Kurt Cobain Funko.
A Funko.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
That's Kurt Cobain. Yeah, he's on my station.
Now I gotta see.
Fans.
I've got some stuff over here, but I can't.
I have a question from.
Do you have a
community.
Funko too?
No, I do have Funko statues, but of the Boston Celtics, because I'm a big basketball fan.
That's great.
Okay.
I have a question from the community. Ivan Garci, he's saying, if bands like Pink Floyd had AI back then, already being incredible, how much better could they have been?
I mean, first of all, the use of the word "better" is problematic, right? Because AI was, Pink Floyd was perfectly Pink Floyd. It's actually kind of an interesting question. If you think that ultimately AI as a technology, when it becomes whatever it's going to become, will give us more exquisite control over the output, the musical output of what we are creating, so that we can make things more perfect. And then you put that side by side against the idea that a lot of what's interesting about music is mistakes. I mean, guaranteed, this Pink Floyd did not set out, at the beginning of making their songs or their records and write every note out exactly the way we heard it. You know that things happened in the studio and things happened along the way that were not, you could not have predicted. So in that sense, AI would not have been helpful in coming up with Pink Floyd was. The other way I interpret the question is more to think about the notion of what it means to be creative. And I really believe, I mean, some people may be more inclined to visual arts or to music or plastic arts, but I really believe that creative people are creative. And if you put AI in front of David Gilmour when he was 9 years old and looked at what would have happened, I bet you something really interesting would have happened. So Pink Floyd probably would have done something interesting, but whatever they did would sound very different from what they sounded like. So I guess those are the ways I think about trying to answer that question.
And do you think that AI music?
I'm sorry,
I give you an example. Do you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah,
Hello?
I missed a couple of words
Did you
there.
hear me, Jonathan?
Yes.
Sorry, I was can inspire a musician or a band. Yeah. So you said maybe Pink Floyd.
Okay, we are
Or
having some
something. He
network
maybe
issues.
could do something.
Well, if I
Okay.
think what I heard the word inspiration, and I heard sort of a question about, do you think that AI can somehow inspire? Absolutely. I mean, inspiration comes from, within the mind, the soul, the heart. And if you are offered an idea, your response to it is, kind of what the inspiration is, right? So whether it's somebody plays a lick and you hear that lick, it's like, oh, here's what we should do, to accompany. Or if you have a prompt from an AI, write me a song about, eating pizza in the garden with my daughter on a beautiful day, and then blah 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 blah. And then you hear something that's like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Now I have a sense of direction. I really like that, or I really don't like that. I want to do something completely different. So I think the inspiration is really in us, in the human. I think another way to come at this question is there are sort of two sides to this phenomenon. One is the creative act, which is the domain of the artist. The other is the listener and the audience. And so, another version of this question is, how does AI generated music land on the ears and in the minds of audience members? Are people going to be inspired by or enjoy purely generative music? And I guess that is kind of inspiration, right? You hear something, and if it stimulates you and inspires you to dance or to feel something or
Yeah.
whatever, that's sort of the listener's version of inspiration. And I think we've already seen that people are inspired by algorithmically generated music.
We were talking in class a few days ago with my students about. So I showed them a few examples with a melody, and then the examples that Suno created. And they were like, wow, what am I doing here studying music? What am I doing here studying in audio. What do you think about that? Do you think that we are going to quit our jobs for AI? That AI will replace us, or because it's very good?
So
O sea, every time it's so good. Every time perfects everything.
yeah, so this is a really big question, and um, it needs to be thought about many different ways. Um, I think that AI inevitably it's going to impact music making and music creation. It will impact songwriters differently from how it impacts performers. It will impact performers differently from how it impacts audio engineers. Everybody has a slightly different role, and I think the kinds of tasks that AI or generative AI are well suited to will impact each group differently. So that's sort of thing number one. I think that the people who are probably most under threat initially, just today, are probably songwriters and composers of jingles and things like that, because the writing process, you could write a song and then you can re-record it so it sounds better or different. But the initial sort of creation of the output is something that's relatively simple to do now. The generative AI output still doesn't sound great. We're hearing some of it show up on Spotify or some of the other streaming services, but clearly to the discerning ear, the trained ear, it doesn't yet compare with human created, acoustic recorded, or even synthesized, music. That's not to say that it won't. It may at some point. But then there's the whole question about, oh boy, there's so much to say. What does it mean to be creative? Being creative is a very human thing. Humans will be inspired to be creative, kind of going back to what I said before, no matter what the medium is. And audiences have relationships with artists. And so I think there will always be a place for the sort of artist identity to find the audience. And they're going to be people who have to help make that connection, whether it's recording engineers or mixing engineers. And there will be tools that will be available to assist in these tasks. But in some way, shape, or form, the finished product will need to be curated to some extent by humans. Even if you put something into an AI and you get something out, you have to listen to it and make sure there isn't something that needs to be changed to be made better. But then I know I'm hopping around a lot of ideas here, so feel free to follow up with questions about any of them. But then there's the whole question about how generative AI will impact the economy, the financial side of the transaction. And I think inevitably it's got to have an impact. It's got to have some impact. The amount of audio, I think last year Suno may have generated something like 1 billion tracks.
Wow.
Now, we didn't hear all of them. They weren't all released.
Yeah.
But just in terms of the sheer output, humans can't and wouldn't and won't do that. And
No.
so that's going to play out in different parts of the industry. So will people want to be creative? Will people want to keep making music? Will audiences be interested in consuming music by human artists? Yes. How it's going to impact the economy around this, I think that remains to be seen, but I think that inevitably some jobs will change, some jobs will go away, and hopefully new ones will be created and invented,
Yeah, new works. Jonathan, you teach in Berklee.
I do.
Do you how do you teach or to your students the AI? So because sometimes I am thinking that well, I don't know if, for example, the software synthesizer V from the Dreamtonics and the singer, and you can create a singer, and if I show it to a singer, it will say, "Well, what am I doing here?" Because there's this software maybe can replace me. So how as a educator can we teach that and not make that the people feel like frustrated or what am I doing here because or afraid? It's pretty difficult.
Yeah, so I understand. I mean, it is, I totally understand how people can feel intimidated by the possibility that they won't get to do what they really want to do. If you grow up saying, I want to be a rock star, and you feel like that's no longer possible, that's a scary and it's sort of a sad idea. But if you then turn around and say, okay, so we've got this thing, synthesizer V, in the world, what can it do for me? Right? So there are examples, for instance, of artists who have trained the synthesizer V with their voices, and then their voice model gets licensed out to other people who want to make demos using their voice, and the artist gets paid. So this is an innovation around, okay, let's see if we can figure out a way to use the technology to become something of an income stream for the artist. I encourage, and this is just one small example, but I encourage everybody to learn as much as they can about what the tools are, what they are good at, what they're not good at, and figure out ways in which they can incorporate them into their workflows. We're still in the very early days, so synthesizer V is cool, but it's not polished like a great vocal performance is polished. Again, we assume it will get there. We have to think that it will get there. But you got to learn about it and learn to work with it because it's in the world. It's in our world. And if you don't, you'll be entering the world of music production, working alongside other people who are using it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I would say in many contexts that puts people at a disadvantage. Now, if you're a badass funk bass player and you're playing 150 or 200 gigs a year, you probably don't have much to worry about.
Yes.
Because live performance is a whole different story. But I think we have to acknowledge its existence and learn and understand to use it. The challenging thing for me at Berklee, I'm now starting to teach an AI in production course where
Really?
we're investigating the technology and the
Wow.
workflows. You bet. But we also, at the very same time, and this is a problem education always has, we have to acknowledge that there are analog components for systems, right? We have microphones and microphone preamps at the very least. We have, amplifiers and we have speakers. And so we would be doing the students a disservice if we didn't talk a little bit about electricity, if we didn't talk a little bit about it. We have to talk about acoustics, right? Like we have everything that exists side with everything that is to be. So it's a lot to cover. And at some point, like something's gotta give. Like you can't do everything for everyone all the time. Like a good example is teaching tape. We still have a tape class at Berklee. Maybe 10 students a year decide to take it just because they're interested, and maybe one or two of them actually uses it in their life. But that's the kind of thing that you sort of say, okay, you got to put that aside. That's not a core sort of curricular element anymore. It's just not a basic thing. Doesn't get used.
We have used the technology from iZotope, the ozone, to master, and it's pretty amazing. So, what do you think about the future of mastering with AI?
So obviously I'm biased, um, but let me say this. At the moment, AI mastering systems are, some of them are better than others, but what they basically do is look for, um, frequency changes that can be made to make a track sort of conform to a model. They look for dynamic range problems that they can solve, and they adjust level. These are the three basic things that AI mastering tools do, right? Deal with tone, deal a little bit with dynamics, and deal with level. And so if you look across an entire mix and measure the entire mix, you can do a decent job of that if you're careful, if you don't overcook it. But what AI mastering systems can't do, what they don't do, is understand things about genre. Let's say you have a P bass versus a 5 string, right? And an AI mastering system just looks at the low end as low end. It doesn't understand the differences between the instruments, and it will treat two tracks exactly the same way. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? That doesn't really take into account the intention, the instrumentation. It also doesn't understand the notion of taste. And it's really hard to make these systems like fully controllable and deterministic in terms of how they work, especially the online systems. The iZotope mastering tool puts you fully in control because you push the button, it makes the measurement, and then you can tweak it if you want to tweak it.
Yes.
But the other thing that these systems can't do is understand like dynamic contrast between sections. The intro is a little quieter than the verse, and the verse is a little quieter than the chorus. It doesn't understand these musical ideas. And sometimes when we're mastering, we make these small adjustments in terms of the gain structure, if you will, of a composition. Like, AI systems can't do that.
Yes.
The human sort of judgment and curation of the result is an essential part of mastering. If you're an artist or a mix engineer and you think, yeah, this mix is good enough, send it out to AI mastering, get it back and put it out, that's fine. People do it. In my experience, that is not, it hasn't affected the market for mastering engineers with musicians who really sort of care about the best version of their output. They want that sort of human touch. They want that opinion. So I would say there's almost like two universes, the sort of automation, just like spit out the music, and then the people who care about the details and want to be proud of the output of what they're creating, and they spend time and effort sort of thinking all along the way, every step of the way. What microphone am I going to put in front of the Marshall amp?
Mm-hmm.
What compressor am I going to use on the vocal, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, the people who wants the work really quick, and the people who want to create a
right.
a
Well, the
great
joke,
work.
right? Like people want sort of fast, cheap, and good. You can only have two. You can't have all three.
I cheap yeah, I understand.
You
Hey,
can't have all
that's
three.
amazing. I like it. I like that. I'm going to
Yeah.
write it here in the studio. Hey, Jonathan, David Sikar has a question for you. Come on, David.
Great.
I do. Talking about the relationship between the creator and AI, there's something that happens, and it's that basically when we are creators, we actually want to have control of what we are creating. For example, like a movie director that has a whole team, and he has a vision, and his work is to have a vision, and the team makes the vision come true. That's what AI is actually starting to do. So, as a creator, I actually expect a more symbiotic way of behaving from the AI that I use. And I spend a lot of time, for example, training the AI to be an extension and not a replacement tool. But how do you think this kind of behavior of AI it's actually gonna change, especially when we can actually integrate a user interface into our DAW? We want to create especially a drum part or a specific guitar solo. How do you think this dynamic of having more control over AI it's actually going to be?
Well, yeah, I think there are maybe 2 or 3 questions in there. But I
You
think
made
it
it.
sounded much more human. Um, that was truly a human question.
It was.
You must be practicing. Anyway,
I
so
I have.
you're
He's
good.
an AI.
You're good at human. Um, so I think to the first part of the question, I think that the potential for personalizing AI, where the AI is responsive and adapts to the user, I think that's very exciting. And it's much more exciting than an automated output. Like I would love an AI system over time to start to gain some understanding of sort of my inclinations in terms of the output of my mastering work and sort of give me a shape right from the get-go that I could then finesse. Um, so anything where the AI is more adapted to the individual as opposed to a one-size-fits-all thing, very cool. Um, I think as far as collaboration goes, I don't think that interacting with a neural network is the same as collaborating with another person. Um, I think the kind of interaction, the real time back and forth, the sort of exchange that happens between people, I think, at least in my experience thus far, is very different from anything that I get from working with an AI. And some of that is sort of the lag in terms of time. I mean, generative AI systems take a little bit of time to generate the output. So you sort of have to try something and sit and wait, and then you get something back. And if you don't like it, you know, the other problem is that if you don't like it, you can't say to the AI, do it all exactly the same way again, but in the third chorus, could you change the word, you know, pero to perro, right? You know, it can't do that, right? It at least at the moment, it's not deterministic in that same way. So so you don't have the same kind of control. So I think the question is great because I think it starts to point at what some of the strengths of systems are and what, you know, where they're, I don't want to say weak, but they're not as well suited to certain kinds of interactions.
Well, Jonathan,
Thank you.
I was thinking about every day which app or platforms of AI do you use every
Um,
day of your life?
yeah, well, so I, you know, I'm consulting with Suno,
Yeah.
so I do a lot of work there on the platform. And I also spend time looking at Udio and Refusion and 11 Music, and you know, next week there will be another one. Um, I and there are actually some really cool new workflows coming with these tools. I can't really talk too much about them today, but if you watch this video in October, you can tell me about them. So there's some
In
very,
October.
very,
Okay.
very interesting stuff that's coming out. I use RX all the time. And
Okay.
I don't, you know, and I use the AI informed tools on occasion. But because of the way that that system gives you the kind of control to work into the spectrogram and select sections very easily that you want to work on, I work in the application, the RX application. It's kind of a favored environment, and I know it like the back of my hand. I mean, I worked for the company for quite a while.
Yeah.
But I've also been experimenting. I actually just did a comparative analysis of many, many different separation tools. So Lalai, Moises, the logic stem separator, the RX stem separator. I'm always sort of looking to see how these tools are developing and how they improve and how they change and figuring out what's good for what, because you never know when you're going to need to,
Mm-hmm.
rebalance something a little bit. And you want to make sure you know which tools are the best tools to use.
ChatGPT, maybe. Too.
ChatGPT and Claude, both. And actually, DeepSeek, interestingly, yeah, it's not as capable of certain kinds of tasks, but it has qualitatively a very different output from ChatGPT.
Well, wait. Yeah, I was wondering that. Thank you. David Seekar is telling me that we have a question for you. And we're running out of time, right, David? Yeah.
Well, we can't hear you, David,
we
but
can't hear
but
you.
you look
You can now.
marvelous.
Yeah, we do have a question from the community, and it's Ivan Garcia again. And what about copyrights if you create a song with AI? Important question.
Yeah, what about it? It is an important question. So, and I can only talk about what I've heard. I'm not a lawyer. And also, I can only talk about what I've heard about the way the law is being implemented in the US, or being thought about in the US. I know that the EU, I can't remember what the rules are, but they've come up with their own sort of statement of principles and regulations around the use of AI. If I remember correctly, they are creating the opportunity for artists to opt out of having their work in training data, for instance. But at any rate, in the US, we don't yet know how the court decisions are going to come down between the notion of ownership and fair use, and whether artists will be able to assert a claim to be compensated if their work is included in training data, or if, like, this is sort of a fair use, the abstraction that is including somebody's work in a data set and then just having that abstraction turn into the output of a product, whether that constitutes fair use of their work. There was just a debate around this very topic when it came to books and writing. And I was actually watching some congressional hearings in the US, and it sounds to me like where they're headed in terms of where the recommendations are going to be around the legal issues are that using the text to incorporate it into a data set, fair game. So long as you're not redistributing or republishing somebody's work. But how you get the data. And I think Google basically said they just scraped data from a shadow website to build their data set. And that's where the courts are looking to say, you can't just steal the material to incorporate into your data set. You have to somehow procure it or, obtain the work by buying it. But, I don't know where this is going to end up, and it may be different in every part of the world. I know that, for instance, in China, the notion of copyright is very different from the way it plays out in the United States. And so one of the things that's problematic here is, since we're in such a global sort of world, if you will, sort of multiculturalism, it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle. How do you reconcile differences between different cultures in their approach to IP? And I don't have the answer.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.
there's something actually that I was watching as well, and it talks about the percentage of a piece that have been done with AI. So, for example, it's different to have a full song
That's right.
made with AI instead of having like I just made this part of the lyrics or this part of the vocals with an AI, and so what
Yes.
I've come to find is that this is starting to work a little bit more like stock. For example, I know a DJ that's now using AI to create voices, and he only used the voices and he created the track. So he has the copyright, he owns the copyright, but he shares the creative process with an AI. So it's starting to work more like a stock, probably, for example, when the percentage is not 100%.
Well,
Or how do you see this?
yeah. I mean, in the US, the Copyright Office, I think it was last year, said, okay, we'll grant a copyright so long as the work is not more than 49% AI. But like, how are they going to figure that out? Like, you know, there's some sort of basic logical notion they're trying to advance, but it's completely unexecutable. Like, there's no way that you could, if you're working in that office, figure out what that means, what 49 or 51% of a work means. The one thing that I will say is that if something is purely AI, one can, you can make money from performance royalties, but you cannot make money from mechanical royalties. There's no such thing as owning the master record with AI. So there is no copyright in AI music in that way.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Jonathan,
that's right.
do you think that AI is it's helping us as musicians and audio producers, or do you prefer the analog era or the 80s?
Well,
Nirvana, I don't
is
know
it
what.
helping us? I mean, you know, there's some things that are amazing that it can facilitate, and it can bring joy to people. So in that sense, yes. But you know, I love making music. I love sitting in a room and playing with people. And
Yes.
so it doesn't help me there. It,
Yep.
you know, it doesn't really help me in my decision making,
Okay.
you know, so no. Does it help the music making economy? The answer is no, not at the moment, not yet.
Not yet.
You know, maybe somebody will figure that out. But does it make some things possible that were never possible before? You bet it does.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like magic.
It's like magic. That's right. Well, David Sicar has advertisement of the David.
So remember that you're gonna be able to find this episode with all our past episodes on all streaming platforms. Just get into the streaming platform you prefer and look for Produciendo con Julio Monroy. You will be able to find this episode as a podcast and all past episodes as well. Also remember we have a Discord server, so you can join the community so we can talk about audio, we can talk about producing, you can share your stuff. We might actually have to open a discussion about AI because we have not opened that yet, but I'm gonna really soon. And you can share your work with us and we'll share also in exclusive material. There's also a course coming up, Mezcla con Criterio by Julio Monroy. You can scan the QR if you want more information about this. And remember to check the episode of the week on our YouTube channel, where we connected Delta Records with Studio G Brooklyn using audio movers. It was amazing, and we actually shared a whole song with Joel, and you should definitely check this one out.
Thank you, David. You were going to say something, Jonathan.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if I
No.
interrupted you, but you know,
Okay.
I'll ask your indulgence. you can always edit this out later if you want, but just came out with a second edition of my book
Yeah.
about audio mastering.
Yeah, you
And
have a book.
I have a
We have
book.
the image,
Yeah,
the cover.
I wrote the first version 12 years ago, and I figured it was either time to make the second edition or let the thing go out of print because things have changed. Some things haven't changed, some things have changed. So anyway, before AI takes over everything for the next 3 weeks, this book is still relevant. After that, who knows? But anyway, I just wanted to mention that I'm relieved to have finished it. So now it's in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, you know, a few years ago, I was looking the content of your course in Berklee about mastering, and I said, hey, I want to take that course because it looks pretty amazing. Well, maybe someday, but you know, I'm going to. I need to have that book in my in my my studio because it's amazing that you know, talking about mastering is like the big audio engineers are the ones who must master the songs. Yeah, so the people who knows a lot. So yeah. Do you know where can we buy this book?
Yeah, you can find it at the Hal Leonard. They're a big publisher of music books, Hal Leonard online store, and you can find it on Amazon. I think the second
Ah,
edition is now there.
perfect,
So yeah, yeah,
perfect,
The,
perfect.
yeah.
the book cover is actually now on screen, so you can look at it and you can find it as well. So this is the Audio Mastering Essential Practices second edition from Jonathan Wyner. Thank you a lot for sharing this with us.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, Jonathan, we have run out of time, but I have a last question. I said at the beginning, two mandatory questions, and the second question is: you have lived in many eras, analog, digital, AI. Well, what 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 will be your advice to the new people that wants to begin to study music and audio? Because I think that before AI, it was different, and maybe before digital, you know. But now, right now, what would be the best advice from you?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, stay curious and follow your curiosity. I want to say follow your passion because that's kind of, I think, passion is over here, but figuring out how to work is over here. It's great if they dance together some, but I think that remaining curious, learning about what's new, certainly there's somebody watching this who's maybe thinking to themselves, like, I want to create the coolest all tube, all tape studio and start and make records that sound like 1963. And like for one person in the world, that's going to work. So, somebody will have a dream to do that and they can make that work. But if you want to stand a chance of kind of collaborating with people and having lots of different opportunities, I would say learn about what's new, find opportunities around new technologies. That's what I did. That's what I did with digital. That's what I did with mastering.
Yeah,
That's what I did with surround when DVD audio and SACDs came out. And AI is another opportunity. Game audio is not so new anymore, but it's also kind of a newer frontier of sound. So, not everybody's going to be mixing, the newest Taylor Swift record, but there's lots and lots of jobs for people who understand how to work with new technology and delivering compelling sound, no matter what the technology is. So that's my advice. But it really is driven by, like, stay curious, figure out what's going on, collaborate with people, be the person that everybody wants to work with.
yeah,
Like, I wanted to hang out with Julio today, right? Because Julio is Julio. So there you go.
Thank you, my friend. Well, it's amazing this conversation. I would like to have this same conversation with you maybe in a year. I don't know what
Yeah,
will
yeah, yeah.
happen.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
I'll see you at in Mexico City next April.
Yeah, the Pan American Audio
That's
Educators
right.
Conference. Yeah, of
That's right.
course.
I'll be there.
Perfect. We will be there too with David.
And we actually
Well,
have another event this week, right?
oh really? Yeah, we have
Oh
the
yeah, AES
AES in
in
Mexico.
Mexico City. That's right. Thank you for reminding us.
Yeah, the Latin
There it
American
is.
Convention Mexico 2025 from August 15th to the 17th. It's going to be at Studios Churubusco in Ciudad de Mexico. It's going to be great. They have already published the schedule, so go and check that out as well.
Thank you,
Yeah.
David. Thank you, Jonathan. Well, we have to leave you. I know you have 1 hour. You are 1 hour later from us, so thank you, my friend. It's amazing that you took the time to talk with us, and yeah, and thank you, David, for all the support.
It's really
My,
the people behind the scenes, man.
my
Yeah,
pleasure. My pleasure. I actually love this topic. I'm like biting my tongue because I have a lot of questions, but it's going to be on another opportunity. Well, thank you, Jonathan. It's a huge honor to have you here. Thank you, Julio, for creating these spaces. I think they have a lot of value. So, also, thanks to all the people that connected, all the people that sent questions, that sent hellos as well. So, I leave you with Julio Monroy now. Take care.
thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. It was amazing, and I hope that um, AI will help us in the future. Thank you, Jonathan. I don't have words, and thank you for work in all the recordings that you have worked. I love those records. Thank you.